When I was thinking about Transistor, tons of analogies would spring to mind. It's like a Broadway play. You're afraid to look to the left for fear of missing the right. But nah, that doesn't quite fit. Sometimes it seemed like symbolist painting was the right comparison. But it's not quite right either. Last one. A techno album by a band who just got done making pop rock. Nope. As an audience, it seemed like the best route to understanding Transistor would be to shoehorn it into a mold. But the game refuses. It just moves. The narrative strategy for Transistor is to hide everything in plain sight. In it, you play as the singer Red, who just had her voice stolen when she comes across the Transistor, a sword with a voice of its own. The first few minutes in the city of Cloudbank are overwhelming. The incredible wealth of color, sound, dialogue, and text all work in service of its chaotic aesthetic. The visual design is so excessive and so excessively cool that it's easy to get swept up in and miss story cues entirely. What this does is it keeps the game's straightforward revenge plot synced up with the disposition of its cyberpunk look. The two are both so stylized that sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is you're looking at. It may sound problematic, and it will be for some, but the consistency of its surreal qualities leave a lasting, cohesive impression. The only real issue with the approach is that it makes a first playthrough feel artificially short, because as players we're conditioned to expect a spoon-fed eureka moment before the credits roll, one that never comes. The crux of the game's combat is Red's ability to freeze time, which lets the player plan out all of her movement in advance. It's as far removed from action as any action RPG could be, but the sheer volume of skills keeps things exciting. And because this variety is so important, every time that Red's health empties, she temporarily loses access to one of her abilities. This will drive some people crazy. But it's a well-intentioned attempt to force experimentation. The game makes an effort to have a few of the enemies inform some of the game's fiction, which is really cool, but ultimately isn't fleshed out enough idea to make the combat feel like an important part of the story. And it's a shame to see the idea present but unsuccessful, because most of what you'll be doing is combat. Separate from its visual design, the game is able to characterize its silenced protagonist by giving the player a handful of opportunities to see her acting outside of combat. These subtle moments don't usually go any further than a single button press, but they do go a long way to setting up Red and her sidekick, the Talking Sword, as much more involved in the conflict than they would have been relying exclusively on art direction. And this kind of characterization is also going on through the music. Red has lost her voice, but you can have her hum the tune of whatever music is playing in the background. Whether or not the game's music reflects her psyche is up for debate, but it certainly rings true for songs with lyrics. For a game that can be so intentionally vague, it has such clear intent. The visual and audio design could have created something as singular as Journey, but it chooses to be a combat-driven game because it wanted to be. The story isn't especially complex, but it chooses and succeeds at making a vague and surreal experience. There are so many small flourishes that elevate the game into something thoughtful, and it's just so cool. It moves.